go first.
Can you tell us what we can expect out of the special meeting this afternoon? What is it specifically Council wants to discuss when it comes to the budget?
This is just an opportunity for Council and citizens to have a full briefing on the impacts of the budget on the city. It won't be particularly different than the conversation we had on Thursday, but administration has been working all weekend and had the opportunity to dig a little more deeply into the budget to find some other impacts, which I think will be new to you because we haven't talked about them yet. Council may choose to send administration away to get a little more information on things. I can't imagine that there'll be a very substantive debate today.
We see that there's no provincial funding for the X Games, so we'll probably not go forward.
I know that going for 2020 was always a bit of a stretch goal in order to have everything in place for that. Folks were still working hard on that eventuality, but now that the province has pulled their funding for 2020, it'll be 2021 at the earliest. And I know my colleagues in tourism are continuing to work towards 21.
Are you worried that there won't be any funding next year for 2021?
I am worried about that, yes. But I think that tourism will put together a very solid business case. And listen, when you're thinking about a provincial government that is interested in diversification, that is interested in transforming the economy, this is a really solid way to do that. We've already won the bid, and there really are great tourism and sport benefits for hosting these games at a relatively low price, and I'm sure that is the case that I will make and tourism will make to the provincial government.
2020 was never really locked down, was it?
I'll answer him, then I'll come to you.
2020 wasn't really locked down. Was it?
No, it really wasn't. It was always kind of a stretch goal. When we were awarded the games in the spring, summer of 2019, we always thought, well, let's see if we can do it for 2020, but that was always pretty aggressive. And so going for 21 actually allows us to find a better game. Donc j'ai peur un petit peu que le gouvernement provincial ne va pas offrir l'argent pour 21. Mais le cas est fort. Le cas est fort pour les Jeux X ici à Calgary. Et je veux prendre tous les facts. Je veux faire le cas au gouvernement provincial.
So unless the money isn't there for 2021, Calgary hasn't really lost anything yet.
No, not yet. It was always one of the scenarios that we would start in 2021. The challenge is it's not clear if the provincial government's intent is to pull funding for the project completely or to delay it until 21.
After the budget was released on Thursday, have you had any contact with provincial officials?
Yeah, lots. We've had lots of conversations with different ministers. I went to see Minister Taves at the chamber and had a few minutes to chat with him. Fundamentally, it was funny because I've never had conversations with ministers before that started with, yes, you have every right to be unhappy, but here's why. We had to do what we had to do. And so we've got a job to do here, and my job is always to stand up for what's best for the city of Calgary.
Can you explain a little bit of the finagling we saw in there? There's a lot of councillors keen to get on that Green Line committee. Why do you suppose that is?
Because it's $4.5 million. It's the largest public works project in our history, and it goes through the wards of fully half of the councillors. So I'm happy we have this committee. I'm happy that it'll be able to focus, particularly given what we heard in the provincial budget, and you're going to hear a little more this afternoon, around what implications that has for the Green Line. And this committee really is going to have its work cut out for it.
What work will they have to do if it's a matter of waiting 3 years to even begin on a lot of these things?
A lot of people would dispute that that's the right way forward, to wait, and we'll have to look at a lot of different scenarios to see whether we can do this thing on the original timeline, given the provincial changes, whether we can do it at all, whether changes to scope are needed. So I know this sounds like deja vu for those who've been following the Green Line conversation, but it sounds like we've got a lot more talking to do.
Can you explain how the government is able to push that funding back, given that just before the provincial election, there was an announcement with the former NDP government about an agreement for funding for the Green Line, and it was my impression that there was an agreement that was actually signed. There was a contract of how that funding would roll out. Is that not the case?
That is an outstanding question that I'm sure will be asked this afternoon.
A former Premier Redford indicated she'd want to be a voice for Alberta with Justin Trudeau. Have you had any change of hearts if you're asked since? since your name's been mentioned again?
Oh gosh, I feel like a lot of people are talking about me. It's always fun to be talked about, I suppose. But listen, nothing has been offered. Nothing has been contemplated. I think certainly not on my part, and I'm sure on the part of others as well. That said, it is going to be important, as it has been in the past, that folks who are advocating for Calgary and for Alberta continue to do that advocacy. I've done it for many, many years with federal politicians of all stripes, and certainly I'm not about to stop now.
En français, s'il vous plaît, on peut rester sur ce sujet. Pouvez-vous m'expliquer le rôle que vous aimeriez jouer? C'est informel, je comprends, mais quel serait le rôle que vous aimeriez jouer?
Bon, pour moi, c'est important que le gouvernement fédéral entende toutes les voix d'Ouest, mais certainement les voix de Calgary. Il y a beaucoup de choses à faire ici. L'économie calgarienne est absolument vitale pour l'économie fédérale, pour le budget fédéral aussi. Et donc, c'est important pour moi d'avoir les oreilles du gouvernement fédéral et peut-être je peux faire un petit pas pour améliorer toutes les divisions de notre pays.
Est-ce qu'on peut dire que votre relation elle est bonne avec Justin Trudeau et le gouvernement libéral, plus que d'autres personnes, d'autres élus ici en Alberta?
Well, parce que je porte violette chaque jour, parce que c'est rouge et bleu, j'ai une position unique de parler avec tous les gens différents d'Alberta. Et pour moi, ça c'est peut-être le valeur que je peux faire. Would you like that in English, by the way?
What is it?
That was a much longer answer to the question you asked.
I heard red and blue
Yeah,
with the purple.
I think you're fine.
Said Alberta, I think, once or twice. I also wanted your thoughts on the removal of the tax credit that encouraged video game companies to come into the province. Do you think that affects technological innovation here?
Yeah, so the provincial government has taken a stand that they don't want what they're calling boutique tax credits, that they would rather reduce the corporate tax rate for everyone, which is sort of ironic because the Conservatives just ran federally on a series of boutique tax credits. The challenge here is that when we do our economic development work, it is sometimes about moving head offices to Alberta, but much, much more often it is about getting people who are headquartered in other places to expand in Alberta. But generally you pay your corporate income tax where you're headquartered. So the reduction in the overall corporate income tax is actually not very helpful in attracting business here, particularly in the tech sector and interactive digital media. And I know when people think video games, they think kind of minor, meaningless stuff. It's a $150 billion industry. It's bigger than Hollywood. And so we had a real opportunity, and we started to attract some video game developers and companies here, good, high-paying jobs in a growth industry. And we've already heard from a couple of them. Well, we've heard from one of them that they're not even considering Alberta anymore. We've heard from one that's here that the advantage for being in Calgary has almost disappeared, and they're considering their options. So it's not just video games, it's all kinds of businesses that we're hoping to attract here that relied on that little incentive to help start up those provincial credits. So had I been in that position, I probably would have made a different decision on that.
Just to add some color to that, the government would say that going to any other jurisdiction, they're going to pay more tax, so why would they leave?
But remember, they're paying tax where their head office is, so it's not actually a relevant question. The real question is, what can you offer me in order to make investments in this community? It's all about the investment tax credits. And so that's really a challenge here. The other interesting question here is on film. We finally have a tax credit instead of a grant, taking us to what most leading jurisdictions are doing in this area, but it's not very well funded. So I'm not at all clear that that is going to be able to give our film industry the juice and boost that it needs. And remember that the film industry in the Lower Mainland in Vancouver employs 100,000 people. So this is not peanuts. These are big industries with big potential jobs, and I'm not sure that we are really able to compete here. The budget overall is, although the Premier talks about innovation a lot, I don't see a lot in this budget that is really focused on innovation and diversification.
Do you know what the impacts of this will be on the Calgary Film Centre?
Yeah, not good. I don't specifically know the answer to that question yet. Certainly that's some work that needs to be done. The good news is the Film Centre is full up through the end of this year into next spring. After that, it's not clear how this is going to impact that.
To save time later, I want to ask you about a committee meeting tomorrow talking about fluoride.
I was unaware of that meeting.
The recommendations are in there as basically administration is saying we can't afford to do this anyway. So why have this discussion?
This is an important discussion. It's a values-based discussion. It's a conversation about public health. It's a conversation about the role of the city, and certainly it's something that citizens are really interested in. My own position on this is clear. I've always been in favor of science-based, evidence-based decision making, and it'll be interesting to see what council thinks about that. But certainly this is something that's been driven by many, many citizens who really want us to reopen and have this conversation. All right, thanks everybody.